evening, but it would be nice for more of the committee to be on before we start. Just a few more minutes. Okay. 6 o'clock. Here's Joseph. Hi, Joseph.
Hey, Renee. Hi, everyone.
Sean and Kate, I hope you don't mind if we wait just about two more minutes just for a few more people to hop on, if that's okay with you. I'd just like to get a few more members. I'm just gonna. Okay. Okay. I want to be really mindful of everyone's time. So I will start right now give my spiel, and hopefully a few more people will pop on after that. My name is Renee Kinsella. I'm the chair of the Budget, Education, and City Services Committee. That's BEX for short. Julie Chu is the co-chair of this committee. This evening, we're going to have two discussions. Both Councilmember Bottcher's office and Councilmember Rivera's office have personnel who will be discussing redistricting. And we're then going to discuss the budget requests and the district statement needs. A brief overview of how the BEX committee works. We will hear each presentation, and once it's concluded, the committee will be permitted to ask questions of the presenter. And when all of the committee's questions have been answered, members of the public will be permitted to ask questions of the presenter. As tonight's meeting is scheduled as a discussion, we're unlikely to go into business session, but that's when the committee discusses among its members how it would like to proceed. So to begin, we have Sean Coughlin of Councilmember Bottcher's office and Katie Scherer of Councilmember Rivera's office, who will discuss redistricting with us. I know that the committee has all received information regarding redistricting and the hearing calendar, but I just want to sort of recap for everybody. The New York City council districts are drawn every 10 years by an independent districting committee, and that follows the US Census, and it brings the city into compliance with the constitutional doctrine of the one person, one vote, the Voting Rights Acts of 1965, I think, in the city charter. And each district has to include close to the same number of voting age residents with very little variation permitted. The commission is also charged with keeping the communities and the neighborhoods intact, ensuring equitable representation of minorities, avoiding odd-shaped districts, limiting districts that cross boroughs, and avoiding gerrymandering, all the while trying to keep the districts compact. It's a huge task. So part of this process, the commission prepared its preliminary plan for the 51 city council district maps, and that was published in, I think, early July. And the hearings were held, and then in August, a second round of hearings were scheduled in the hopes of receiving specific public comments suggesting improvements to those districts. And those hearings, as you probably know, concluded on August 22nd. And then that input is supposed to go into a plan that the commission submits to the city council in September. And the new maps that are ultimately adopted will go into effect, I believe, in February, ahead of the next city council elections. Districting commission is made up of 15 members. 7 are appointed by the mayor, 5 by the council's Democratic majority, and 3 by the council's Republican minority. And then they're working with Redistricting Partners, which is a California-based firm, to actually draw the maps. So New York City population grew by about 630,000 people between 2010 and 2020. So that means that they have to have the average size of each city council district to be about 172,280, I guess, residents in each district, even though the districts can deviate a little bit, but they have to follow all those other rules that I mentioned. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Sean and to Kate who will give us a comprehensive review of what's been happening with redistricting since and where we are now. So, Sean, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, there's a great summary of everything that's happened so far on the broad view. To folks who don't know me, my name is Sean Coughlin. I'm
Hi.
Eric Bottcher's chief of staff. I always love coming back to CB5 because when Eric hired me 7 years ago, when he was Corey Johnson's chief of staff, I was brought on as the Community Board 5 liaison. So lots of memories there, and Vicky looks the exact same today that she did then. So as you said, that was exactly right. So where we are now, the Districting Commission put out their map, their first proposed map. And some neighborhoods were like, great. Other neighborhoods were like, this is terrible. For example, your neighbors to the west, Hell's Kitchen, discovered that where they had previously been almost exclusively represented by Eric Bottcher in the council, with some of Northwest Hell's Kitchen being in Gail Brewer's district. Now they were pretty evenly split between Bottcher, Brewer, and Councilmember Powers from the east side. So there was a concern there that there was a dilution of their voting power, that, you know, now instead of having one council member pay a lot of attention to them, they had three council members kind of treating them as an afterthought. So in the public hearings that came afterwards, you heard from a lot of neighborhoods that weren't necessarily thrilled with the proposed map. Hell's Kitchen was a big one. I know Roosevelt Island was redrawn from being represented by currently Upper East Side Councilmember Julie Menon to now be included with Councilmember Julie Wan in Queens, in Western Queens, along with a small slice of the Upper East Side. I know there was also concern about some areas of Harlem that had been drawn out of the Harlem district. And then there were other neighborhoods that were really excited. Staten Island, for example, had put on a big campaign actually ahead of the proposed map to fight to keep 3 whole council districts on the island of Staten Island, even though it very, very barely meets the population deviation that Renee pointed out in her summary. I'll add one more bit of detail to that summary. When the lines were drawn in 2013, there was actually an allowed deviation of 10% between the lowest population and the highest population district, which at that time came out to around 80,000 people or so. And now it's by state act, it was reduced down to 5%. So the deviation between council districts in population, I believe, can only go from like 168 to 177, that being 168,000 to 177,000 people. For a bit of context of where we are right now, Council District 3, while the ideal population is 172,000, Council District 3 being Councilmember Bottcher's district of Hell's Kitchen, Chelsea, the West Village, parts of Midtown. Ideally, we should be at 173, and right now we're at 203. So in the past 10 years, an additional 30,000 people have moved into our district. And that's the reason that these lines are redrawn, is there are actual districts in Brooklyn that have, I think they have 150. So they have around 55,000 less constituents than we do, which is a bit of a disservice to our constituents, that we have the exact same amount of resources to represent an additional, 25% of the constituent base. So that's another part of this process, is to make sure that every New York's resident is receiving the same level of representation and service. And that's a trend that you're seeing in a lot of Manhattan, in Councilmember Rivera's district as well, and most of Southern Manhattan. All of our populations increased. I think the only Manhattan districts whose population is currently below the ideal deviation of 172 are council districts 10, 9, 8, and 7, I think, which is all Northern Manhattan. So what you've seen in the proposed maps that have had to happen is the northern Manhattan districts have happened to get geographically larger in order to encompass more population, while the southern Manhattan districts have had to grow, or I'm sorry, to shrink in order to meet those new population amounts. And that's always a tricky thing because it's very difficult for a representative to have to say, well, these are the 30,000 of my constituents I no longer want to represent. So that's why in the chat, I actually included a feature that the Districting Commission had put out, and I'm not sure if the board can share that more broadly. There's a tool in which people can actually draw their own draft maps. And it's a really great opportunity, and perhaps it's just evidence of my deep nerddom that I really enjoyed it. But it's really fascinating to start. I found it best to start at the southern tip or the northern tip of Manhattan and just draw until you get to 172,000 people, and then start another district and go to 172. And you see how much of a jigsaw puzzle it really is, where if you have, we have to lose 30,000 constituents, that means somebody else has to take those 30,000 constituents. And it has to be one of the districts that's next to us in council districts 1, 2, 4, or 6. So then where are they losing constituents after taking in our constituents? And that's where I find drawing maps Manhattan-wide are really fascinating, because it gives you a glimpse into some of the efforts that the commission has to take to meet the standards that Renee pointed out, while also trying to satisfy one of the standards that is communities, like-minded communities, like-minded neighborhoods, communities of interest. And so you have folks that say, we want to keep Hell's Kitchen whole. And then when you look at the map, it's really hard because there's only so many places for these to go. And so, to keep one neighborhood whole, are we separating another neighborhood? And so it's a really fascinating kind of give and take that I would encourage everyone who's interested to do that on. The next step, so all this feedback has been given through public hearings and through testimony that's been submitted. So the commission is now taking all of that, processing it, and doing another draft of a map that will hopefully acknowledge and absorb the feedback that they received at the public hearings and at the testimony. And as Renee said, they will then present the next version to the city council by September 22nd. So that what will happen then is it's a bit of a fork in the road. So the council will vote after a few weeks of reviewing the material. If the council votes and it is approved, we're done. Those are the new maps. There will be an election in 2023 with those new lines. For the most part, I will be incredibly surprised if anyone who is not currently, or if anyone who is currently representing a district does not run again to represent as close to whatever district they were in before. There won't be any term limits up in 2023. So everyone who's currently representing in the city council will be eligible to run again. And then everyone will run with the new lines, whatever they are. And then that starting in January of 2024, those are the new lines, new representatives, we move on from there. If the council votes to not approve the second proposed map, then the commission goes back and does the whole thing over again. They do another round of public hearings, another round of taking testimony, but this time, the map that they put out for the third time, their third map, that does not go to the council for a vote. That goes directly to the city clerk for adoption. So the city council sort of has to weigh the pros and cons of saying, okay, is this map that we've been presented on September 22nd so unacceptable to us that we're willing to risk sending it back and not having any kind of, oversight? They can submit testimony again, but there's no guarantee. Or do we feel good enough? Do enough of the council members feel good enough about where the lines are that we're willing to take it and move on? So that's really going to be the next step, is when the new maps are sent out by September 22nd, and we're sent to the council to be voted yay or nay. And I'm sure Kate has all sorts of details and insight that I failed to mention. So I'll turn it over to her and let her fill in the gaps of the many holes I'm sure I left.
Oh, that was a really great explanation, Sean. I think to add our office, we're in City Council District 2. is facing a similar scenario where we've had an increase in population. So our district would be geographically a little bit smaller. Under the proposed map right now, we would be losing part of the Lower East Side, but also expanding a little bit northwest to have actually more of Community District 5. So we would have Koreatown under this proposed map. But again, we're going to get a new revised map by September 22nd. Our office, we're really trying to take feedback from constituents and also our community districts, like in anticipation of that new map. So we're really, we're here for feedback if you have any.
Thank you both so much. I want to ask the committee if they have questions. If they have questions for either Sean or Kate. Please raise your hand if you have questions. Am I seeing no questions? I know that the committee did receive, we gave them the tools to look at the maps and all of that. I don't see any questions, but I have a question and I will ask you, well, first I'll turn it over. Are there any members of the public here that would like to ask questions?
Renee, I see that Julie has her hand up.
Okay, I didn't see that. Julie, I'm sorry. Julie.
All right, that's a late hand. I'm wondering, it sounds like there was a public hearing, and I'm just wondering what were some comments that the public shared, and wondering if you could share some with us.
Yeah, there were public hearings. I'm trying to pull up, I think the videos might be available to view, but in case you don't have 4 hours to burn on watching the video of the public hearing. The big things we heard at the Manhattan hearing were the ones that I mentioned, Hell's Kitchen being split among 3 different council districts, Roosevelt Island being taken out of a Manhattan district and put into a Queens district, and some current concerns about historically and culturally relevant sites and locations being removed from the Harlem City Council District. That was the main focus of the Manhattan district. I'll be honest, I didn't pay the closest of attention to the other boroughs because we had enough excitement in Manhattan to keep us busy. But I know there are some concerns in Brooklyn regarding attempts to create a predominantly Asian American district and how it may have unintended consequences about separating other ethnic and minority groups. And obviously, as I said, Staten Island made a pretty concerted push to keep 3 districts solely on Staten Island instead of having 2 Staten Island districts and then a Staten Island and Southern Brooklyn district. The Bronx, I don't know that there was a lot that I heard about in the Bronx. I'm sure people who know more about the Bronx, and same with the Queens. I'm sure with Queens that there is stuff that people who are more versed on it can share, but those are the major features of the Manhattan hearing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Joe, you have a question. You're muted, Joe. You're still muted.
I think Joe's good now.
Yeah, my mic, I picked the wrong microphone, sorry. I think you mentioned it, but I didn't capture. What's the timeline? When is this going to become passed?
So the next step will be September 22nd. That is when the commission will submit its next round of maps to the council for the council's review and vote. So if the council votes to approve, which would have to happen at a stated meeting, likely in October. There are 2 stated meetings every month. So at some time in October, I imagine that's when the vote will happen. If the council votes to approve, then we don't do anything else with these maps until the primary in, I imagine, June of 2023. That'll be the first time that these new maps are on the ballot, or the representatives of these new maps are on the ballot. The maps will be approved, and then we'll go to the voting booths for the primary to decide who will be the party nominees. And then November 2023 will be the general election for the new maps. And then January 1st, 2024, everything comes into effect. All your whoever your new representative is your new representative, the new districts, the new council members, everything is set on January 1st, 2024.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Anyone? I see. Joe, do you have another question, or you still have your hand up? No. Okay, gone. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to switch to attendees and see if any of our attendees have any questions. If they do, please raise their hand. I see a 516 number. Okay. I'm seeing none there. I actually have a question. So you mentioned our best recourse, or our best way to get involved in this, again, is to offer our comments and redraw the maps. Is that basically what you would recommend?
Absolutely. So I'm putting another link in the chat. So it's the email address where testimony can be sent. And
Okay.
I can assure you, from conversations with the staff of the commission, it all gets read. And I'm afraid I'm not well versed enough in the District R map drawing program to tell you exactly how this works. But if you do draw a map, there is an opportunity. There's I think almost a single button basically to click and then send that map into the commission along as a suggestion. So it's not necessary. It's certainly helpful. And again, it's an exercise that I enjoyed. So like-minded people would also, I think, find it enjoyable. But the most important thing when submitting your testimony is to give kind of suggestions. So to say, my community of interest is block X to block X, block Y to block Z, or whatever, just sort of like, this is my shared, apologies. Someone from Peru was calling me. I'm sure that was a very valid phone call that sent a very important message about my non-existent car registration information. So to give suggestions, so to not just say, keep my neighborhood together, so to give very firm, like, and here's why, this is the floral district. These 3 blocks together have historically had all these flower shops, and it's really important to keep it in the same district. I live in a building, and the building across the street, we share a tenant association. Like, our tenant associations are really close. We want to stay in the same district. Like, give a suggestion, these 2 things, these blocks, this radius should be within the same district, and here's why. And they said that testimony is really, really helpful, because as much as the 15 commission members and all the staff members are brilliant people and really well versed, they don't know your block as well as you do. They don't know your, surrounding community area as well as you do. So really specific and detailed feedback that you can provide on, it can be where you live, where you work. This is a shared community of interest from this area to this area, or encompassing these buildings, encompassing these blocks, and it should be kept in the same district because.
Okay. Thank you. Vicky. I see. your hand.
Sean, can you tell us what other boards?
Listening.
Other boards? I beg your pardon?
That
I
was
think
me.
I was unintentionally speaking.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us other boards that have weighed in on this, and where that can be, if and where that can be found, whatever they have submitted officially from the board?
Yeah, I know that I believe Community Board 4 wrote a letter on this, which I know can be found on their website. I also know that adding another link into the chat. All of the submissions of public testimony are publicly accessible. So it's actually kind of interesting. You can go and scroll through the list. They have all the hearings. So it's, public hearing July 7. Here is all the people who spoke about Brooklyn. And then they break it down further into elected officials, organizations, individuals. And
Okay.
so it's kind of broken down by county and then broken down by here are all within this speaking at this hearing about this borough. Here are all the individuals, here are all the organizations, and here are all the elected officials who provided testimony. And you can actually click on them and read the testimony that they submitted. So that's one option to see about what groups, individuals, and elected officials submitted public testimony. And then I know, for example, Community Board 4 submitted a letter to the commission, which is on their website.
Mhm. Also,
And
community,
that's basically to do with the fact that they now have 3 separate districts. That's their biggest complaint.
Yeah, I believe that was the focus of their letter as well.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
just to be clear for the committee, the way that I was reading the maps that were mooted, Community Board 5, although there's some nibbling, changing of representatives, we still have the same 3, right? Yeah. Just so everyone's know. Kate, do you have additional comments?
I don't.
Anything? Vicki, did you want to add?
Sorry.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. So in the chat, Sean has given us where to draw our own maps. It is fun. I tried it as well. And we can look at those submissions. And I thank you. I hope everyone in the committee will get involved. And I appreciate you both coming tonight. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to nerd out more about maps. It's a favorite thing, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Sean. What we'll do now is we will turn to our district needs and our budget requests, everything budget. As you all know, every single year, every community board prepares a community district needs statement. And that identifies the funding priorities that for each community board. And they are required to hold a budget hearing. The district needs statements are key to informing the city's neighborhood and the infrastructure planning and the equitable and efficient delivery of services to communities. So city agencies, I don't know if you know this, but the city agencies have to respond to our budget requests in the city's annual budget. So during this process, we are tasked with identifying the most pressing issues facing our district, as well as our most important issues within 7 policy areas. We tend to call them silos. We also need to identify 40 capital and 25 expense budget requests for the districts. This document must be finalized and submitted to OMB by October 31st, which means we have this meeting and then our next meeting in September to finalize our requests. Julie and I met with each of you, each team individually, to discuss how to undertake the outreach to various stakeholders to identify the needs and budget requests. And each team has been responsible for adding to the Google document the capital and expense request. Julie is sharing her screen right now. And what I'd like to do as part of this exercise is to quickly run through each of the policy areas so the assigned team can give their input on, given what the work that they've done to date, what they deem most important based on their due diligence and outreach. So as we undertake each policy silo, we can also ask members of the public if they have additional input, suggestions, or comments. Julie, you have the district needs statement up. We can skip the top 3 issues overall and go to the first policy issue, which is healthcare and human services. That was Mary and Julie. I guess Mary is not here at the moment. Julie, have you identified your top issue in this silo?
I haven't identified on this list, but the advocates were very specific that they're looking for housing, permanent housing.
Mm-hmm.
as well as more oversight for landlords and services, staff that help with services and providing benefits. So if you want to bear with me. But for the permanent housing, I guess that shifts to the land use team where it wouldn't be addressed with the healthcare silo. But yeah, programs, services to prevent homelessness.
So
Do you
that
want
would-
me to mark up this?
If you could, as the number one, and then I'm going to ask the committee, have they, as they've done their outreach into their own silos, have they any comments or have they any input into the area of health and human services? Any of the committee members? I know this is a little bit more difficult to do when we are not face to face. So I apologize for that. I see a hand. Whose hand do I see raised?
Chuck's
It
hand.
is Chuck and Tristan. Yes.
Thank you, Renee. I've heard a lot of concerns expressed by workers in the district and by some residents, really more workers, about a perception that there are more individuals with mental health issues on the streets and around buildings than in previous years. I don't know if statistically that's true, but I know that perception's out. So I wanted to just raise that for consideration by that silo lead.
Thank you, Chuck. Tristan.
I was just going to speak up to support the services to reduce or prevent homelessness. I think time and time again, year and year after year, that seems to be one of the bigger items coming up from our stakeholders. So I know it's already on there, but just to second that.
Great. Thank you. Zona.
To echo what others have said, the Times Square Alliance gave input that they are super keen to increase funding for community first outreach in addition to existing street services to help provide people with support and meet them where they are before attempting more broader outreach. We've included that in our tab.
Okay. So I think we have three right here. I mean, traditionally, healthcare and human services addressing both mental health and the services to prevent homelessness have traditionally been in our top, 5 always. So I think as we continue to dump in the comments, we'll keep those 3 highlighted. Does anyone else have any comments? Joe?
No, I just wanted to echo, I think mental health and homeless services would be the number 1 and number 2 if I was to rank them.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to,
Julie? Yeah.
I just wanted to flag healthy food. We did speak to Midtown South Community Council, and that's a big thing they're trying to push. It sounds like they're providing fresh fruit and vegetables to local shelters and programs in our district.
Okay. Other comments? Any public comments? Anybody who's attending from the public who have comments specifically regarding this policy area? Okay, seeing none, we're going to keep those highlights: healthy food, mental health, services for low-income and vulnerable workers, and services to reduce or prevent homelessness. I know this is a little bit messy, but the way that we've traditionally done this, and again, it's easier face-to-face. We haven't been able to do that recently, but it's to get these in some semblance of order and then reorder them again in the next meeting once we drill down with the specific budget requests. So if we move on to the next silo, we'll hold that and then move on to the next silo. It's youth education and child welfare. We're going to have to skip it because both Kim and Seth were unable to be there. be here tonight. So the next silo is Public Safety and Emergency Services. That's Chuck and I. I would say, based on what we have heard from outreach, that general crime, meaning the reduction of crime, specifically, I can refer to the Times Square area, would be the number one issue, but I will also defer to Chuck to speak to this, since he's also in this group.
Oh, I agree with that. That's consistent with what I'm hearing and understanding as well, Renee.
Great.
Thank you.
Other comments from the committee on this as the most important area in this policy silo? Comments or thoughts? I mean, obviously, everything listed in these policy silos are important. We know that, and it's hard to pick and choose. We go through this every year. It's hard to just pick one. Okay, so we'll hold that, and then we'll move to the next, just so that we can have the number one in core infrastructure and city services. That's Tristan and Jonathan. Do you want to speak to that most important issue by this policy area?
Sure. So excuse me, but we didn't get a chance to discuss our top 2 or 3 between the 2 of us. But I would just say for me, the top 2 that come to mind, talking to stakeholders, were cleanliness and trash collection, and preparedness for extreme weather events and flooding. I think those are both in our top 3 last year as well. Jonathan, anything else come to mind to you?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Comments from the committee? Any comments from the committee about that? I see Zona.
Kind of just to echo that, our group got feedback that like the restaurant and sidewalk sheds in particular were kind of an area of focus in terms of it being a really difficult process to take them down, needing a lot of different agencies to come together. So would definitely echo that cleanliness is a factor.
Okay. I would also say that one of the issues that has always come up has been noise pollution, and I'm not in this silo, so I would not necessarily, I will defer to you, Tristan and Jonathan, if you haven't heard that or haven't seen that in the data. Just you know, it's been trucks and noise and building and all of that has traditionally come up. I don't know if you've heard that at all.
Not personally, but maybe I also wasn't really asking. I know a lot of people are concerned about noise. I just kind of take it as a given that we're in the city, we're going to have noise, but I know a lot of people think it's a big issue. Jonathan, anything in your?
I mean, it seemed like noise is kind of, an automotive thing. It's the honking, it's the loud music, it's the people on ATVs and whatnot, and that might be, better addressed in, a crime kind of thing, or so it might not. I'm not sure if this is exactly the best way, silo for noise pollution specifically, because it's rooted somewhere else.
I think that's a good point, Jonathan. Chuck, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, a couple of things I was going to point out. I think Sean's gone, but I know that Councilmember Botcher has made the cleanliness and trash collection issues a huge priority. So to the extent that we want to coordinate with his office, I think that'd be great. And I'll just say, as a resident of the district, on the noise, it's not really unintentional city noise that is the issue. It's people riding loud motorized bicycles or bikes for the purpose of making loud noise that I think is causing a lot of problems. And I've heard some complaints. And I think there was a story, I think it was in the Times about, and I'm not sure would advocate this, about noise sensors and automatic tickets for noise producing vehicles. But that was just an interesting thing. That's it.
Thanks, Chuck. I will turn it over to any attendees, any members of the public that are here that have comments on this silo, on this policy silo. Okay, seeing none, what we'll do is we'll keep those and move to the next. And again, these are just our general framework for working through the budget request. And as we make, as we make the specific requests, that will fall into line with how we see these, but this gives us a framework of thinking about our priorities. The next one is housing, economic development, and land use. That's Joseph, Bradley, and Zona.
I'll go first, and then we can see if my colleagues agree. It is hard to narrow down to one here. In my opinion, if I were looking at two, I would say it might be affordable housing creation and commercial district revitalization. And, I think when we have been talking to stakeholders and talking internally, those seem to go hand in hand. Like a lot of the issues in the neighborhood, when it comes to, lagging office occupancy rates, when it comes to the problems of small business owners having enough foot traffic and having enough business, and also when it comes to people's concerns about safety in the neighborhood and, feeling like there's more, homeless people, per every resident or worker that's in the neighborhood for other reasons. One of the solutions that kind of kept coming up is trying to make this more of a mixed use neighborhood. Right now, it's very commercially dominated. And if we could have more housing in the neighborhood, and of course, I think everyone's in favor of affordable housing, you would have more people living here that are here 24/7 supporting businesses. You would address the commercial vacancy issue by, basically changing the use of a lot of this empty space and, using it for something that's needed citywide. I guess Zona, Bradley, any other thoughts?
I think you pretty much captured what I was hearing as well, which is affordable housing creation, I think, is one of the bigger ones. And then a lot of the other ones, especially from what we're hearing from other silos, sort of filter into that commercial district revitalization, be it streetscape improvements or administering of the sort of regulations on the open restaurants program or crime or any number of them. So I think that those two sort of capture the two biggest components of what we heard in our outreach.
I would agree.
Thank you. Anyone else from the committee want to weigh in on this policy silo? Please raise your hand. Okay. Joe.
I don't have a solution to it, and I agree that affordable housing is, issue number one, as well as the district revitalization. But I think a lot of the problems with it is the commercial spaces cannot be easily converted to residential, cost effectively converted, nor does this is not an area of expertise, does the zoning allow for that to happen. So I don't know if this list somehow, some of this may not be budgetary dollar requests, but certainly, easing of existing legislation and land use and tax incentives for conversion of the commercial spaces. I think, I would definitely suggest here.
Thank you, Joe. Bradley.
Yeah, I would just to sort of answer and respond to sort of agree to what you're saying, Joe, is that actually reflects a lot of what we heard, which is some sort of subsidy program for trying to get these commercial properties that are not being used converted into residential properties is one of the things I think that we included within our request. And then also, I think there are a few lines for a series of studies to start to look at those zoning changes. So to transform that sort of zoning change into a budgetary request. That's how we've approached it.
Thank you. Any other comments by members of the committee on this particular policy silo? Any members of the public that want to comment on this particular silo and how we see the issue? I think certainly this policy silo has always been our number one. Housing creation has always been, affordable housing has been always in our top two. So certainly this is one of the ones that I think will probably vote to look in our top three overall, but let's see how we go. Thank you, Bradley, Joseph, and Zona. Let's go to the next one, which is transportation and mobility. That's Mark and Pete. Mark and Pete, what did you determine?
Hi, sorry about joining a little late. I was having some technical difficulties. So we contacted a lot of the business improvement districts and some of the advocacy groups and weren't able to get any responses, unfortunately. But within these issues here, I think it's probably the same issues that the board has raised in previous years, particularly with respect to accessibility. And I think that's actually probably one of the main issues. And then also just the same issues regarding the bus service with respect to the routes, and same thing with the subway as well.
Thank you. Comments from the committee on the issues around transportation. Zona.
I would also raise like safety as kind of an issue with the increase in anti-API violence in the last few years as another area.
In terms of, are you talking about the subway specifically, or?
Yeah, I see there's like a traffic safety. I don't know if that's more pertinent or if subway is more pertinent.
Okay. I think both of them are pertinent. I think both of them have repeatedly traffic enforcement, certainly, in bike lanes and cars, and all of it has something that has come up again and again and again. Interestingly, the open restaurants is in this silo this year. So that's an issue. That's an issue that I think will also be important to people in our district, but I want to hear everybody's comments. Bradley.
Yeah, I just want to sort of raise that, which is something we heard when reaching out to some of the business improvement districts, is that the open restaurants program and streetscape upgrades were sort of some of the things we heard from a few different groups. So I think that that's a priority.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of the committee? Anybody in the public wanting to make a comment on this particular silo? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go to the last silo, which is parks, cultural, and other community facilities. And I'm not seeing either Laura or Bridget on this evening. Laura, Bridget, are you here? I'm not seeing either one of those. So I think I'll ask the committee if they have any thoughts on this area, if it's come up in their research and their outreach for their own silos. Any comments from anyone on the committee on this particular area? Okay, we will leave that. Tristan.
Maybe just, I know we've spoken about when we're going to be back in person, we might have issues finding space, and maybe it could make sense to ask for additional community board resources so that we could ideally have a larger budget so that we can go out and obtain space to meet in person if we're going to leave it like.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that we can, I hope that Laura and Bridget have reached out to Marisa about, but certainly I know that that's something in previous years we've talked about, so that may be important. Julie.
I'm going to bring up public bathrooms. Would that fall into silo because of the open space?
I believe
parks?
so. Mm-hmm. Right, because yes. So that would, I think you would almost tick other for the public bathrooms, and also the POPs fall into this, which I know that we have asked in one of the land use issues that have come before the board. We've talked about asking POPs for bathrooms and expanding the access to POPs. Other comments by members of the committee on this policy silo issue? Any comments from members of the public on this silo issue? Okay. All right. So this is our first run through of this. Traditionally, we've done 2 meetings where we've run through it and sort of prioritized and used the information that each of the teams has gathered on their particular silo. And I would urge and encourage every single team to do their outreach and get the requests from the stakeholders, look at open data, work with Marisa to identify those areas that we that are the most important and that we're hearing the most complaints about, and also where we can make the budget requests. If Julie, you have the Google Doc now where people have been putting in their actual budget requests. So if we look at this now, and thinking about what we've just spoken about and what the priorities are, I would encourage every single person, as they've gathered their requests and reached out to stakeholders, to put in their budget request, what it is, the agency, and the explanation as to why. Again, I would go back to previous years and ascertain whether a budget request has been granted, and if not, we traditionally use that budget request again, because we want to iterate again, unless it's not needed, unless it's been fulfilled. We historically do it from year to year to year until we sort of attain what we were seeking. So Julie, can you make that a little bit bigger? Is that possible?
Sure.
Is that just my own? So has everybody, I just want to run through with the committee. Has each team put in all of their budget requests to date? Everybody? Yes, no?
Doesn't look like it, Renee, but some of the silos have a lot of requests. I don't know if
Okay.
you want to go through some of them.
Okay. Do you, I'm having a hard time without my glad. Julie, do you mind running through what we have?
This is the housing economic silo that has the most. They have at least 20 requests. So I don't know if Joseph and Bradley and Zona want to discuss some of these.
Joseph,
Can I maybe just to simplify things a little bit, can I just point out, I see a number of sort of tax incentives and that sort of thing listed, which are great ideas, but unfortunately fall under, most of that stuff falls under New York State. And so they wouldn't qualify to be on this list.
Okay. So is there a way we can use, so when we're looking at this and we're looking at tax incentives, is there another way to achieve that goal that would not be through tax incentive, but could be a budget request?
I think item number 2 that we have is, instead of a tax exempt, proposing that the city allocate funds for construction financing projects as another way to address the issue. So 1 and 2 are kind of like 2 approaches to the same topic and theme.
Okay. So what I would say to if we can take out those that looked at tax incentives, we'll have to take those out completely. Do you want to go through some of your other requests? Joseph?
And we discuss these internally. I mean, maybe it's more useful if anyone else has any questions about these. I mean, we put ones in here that we thought were good ideas, I guess.
Okay. So I don't want to use this meeting to go through laboriously each request, but what I do need to encourage every team, like Zona and Joseph and Bradley have done, is to put all of the requests, because by the next meeting, we are going to have to order them. So we're going to go through the exercise that we just did with our number one priorities, and then our capital and expense requests will sort of follow through and support those priorities that we've identified tonight. Does that make sense to everybody?
Just to,
Bradley?
sorry, just to clarify, are we ordering them for within each silo or entirely?
I would like for each team to order them themselves
Mhm.
by priority, following the number one priority, if that makes sense. What I'd like to do, the earlier exercise that we did, which gives the number one priority in each policy silo, if the team looks at that and then looks at their requests that they have made and ensures that they have ordered them in a way that supports that number one, we can then go through and order them overall in the next meeting. This is such an easier process when we're face to face, and I'm so sorry. I know I keep saying this. There's no easy way to do it beyond sort of figuring out everybody has to read this document. Everybody has to put, each team must put their budget request in this document. Julie.
Okay, a couple of things. So in the past, we've gone through every single request to weigh them as a team. And I wonder if it makes sense to do some now so that we're not doing all of them in the next meeting. And then the other question is for this silo. I guess, I don't know if you guys have included anything about the inflation of construction costs. And is there any way the budget request can address some of these delayed closings for affordable housing going on across the city because of just the GC coming back with a very high pricing 2 months later, 3 months later?
Could you expand on that, Julie? I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
So we've been building affordable housing, and every 2 months the GC upped their price by millions, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. And the client, the nonprofit, can't close the project because there's a funding gap. So HCR or HPD comes in and, you know, they can provide a little bit of extra funding, but sometimes, you know, but Joseph, you're also in the same industry, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. We don't have one specifically about that, but I think it's like, maybe it's worth considering. I haven't been able to think of any solutions, and I haven't heard of any solutions for that other than just increasing the amount of like capital subsidy that HPD has for their affordable and supportive housing programs, because that's what they lean on, right? And when they delay a closing because they can't cover increased construction cost, it's because they're saying they can't put any more subsidy capital dollars into, you know, X project or Y project because they only have so much. So, you know, I think that could be a pretty simple budget ask, is just continue to, you know, increase, you know, capital funding for these programs at HPD.
Yeah, and a short-term request is just, you know, for hopefully the next year, and then inflation goes back down or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think that one makes sense. Definitely.
Can we add that one into this Google Doc?
Yes, I think I can work with Joseph to put something in, but I think it wouldn't hurt. I know it's a lot of requests here, Joseph, that your team, you guys can just highlight these so we can understand them, because eventually we'll have to vote on which ones we are going to include.
So just kind of like summarize them now?
I mean, if you want to go through them, especially the ones you guys feel strongly about, so we just understand the requests, because some of them get pretty complicated.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to hold that thought for one moment? I see Tristan's hand is raised. Tristan?
This is more of like a broader process question or suggestion. I don't know if you want to keep talking about this, but part of me thinks it could make sense to, rather than like next month go through this full list as a group and try to rank them. We could potentially do some process where we put like pens down on this spreadsheet like a week before the meeting, and then we consolidate all these requests into one master document, and then we ask all the members of the committee to go through and rank them 1 through X amount, and then to guide our discussion we can have like a weighted average ranking of the requests, and then we could just go through from the highest ranked to the lowest, as a way to streamline the effort. Because I can see like there are a lot of requests in this document, and we could really struggle to decide like what merits inclusion and what doesn't, and how to prioritize.
Right. I think that's how we did it before when we were in person. We ranked them 1 through whatever it was, and then we looked at it. And I'm happy to do it that way so that we don't have to use the bulk of this meeting just going through laboriously each. But it depends on this committee. Everybody has to put in their requests, and we must rank them. So that I'm happy to do it a week before, and we can convene offline in order to get that ranking done that we can discuss at the next meeting. I'm happy to hear the committee's thoughts on doing it that way. Unless there's, as you look through this document, is there something, Joseph, that you think is needs explanation from your requests? Just briefly.
Let's see. I mean, yeah, I think one we really liked. I hear Marissa's point that like 421G in the financial district was the state tax incentive. I do wonder if, you know, there are city taxes on real estate, and I know that one of the things that a lot of people have proposed is kind of like tax reform that would be, I know the city would be involved in that process, and kind of reassessing how properties in New York City are taxed. Because right now we disadvantage multifamily, especially rental buildings, compared to single family homes. And that's one of the reasons that it's more expensive to build rental apartments in neighborhoods like ours. That said, that gets really complicated, and I don't even think I know enough about it to distill it into a budget line right now. So maybe we just nix that first one. I think let's see, the second one, I think is pretty self-explanatory. This is just kind of creating like a capital subsidy program to facilitate the conversion of commercial properties that make sense as residential buildings into those residential buildings, just making it less expensive, encouraging developers to take on those projects. And I think especially, you know, affordable developers. Bradley mentioned that, you know, we tried to accomplish some of this through, you know, funding studies or funding like policy kind of white papers, I guess you would call this. So this was, you know, funding a study within our community district to identify basically where there's, you know, an underutilization of space, like where there's allowable space that could be developed, basically to help the city, you know, pour subsidy into those areas. So if anyone has any questions about, let me know, but I think that's what we were trying to get at with, I think it's number 3 on that list. I think we all felt strongly about number 4 being important. I think a lot of you have read about 421A, which is the program that expired recently that subsidized a lot of our real estate development, residential real estate development. And this is a state program, but that said, you know, it's important enough that we don't think we should give the city a pass on it. So we think we should, you know, fund we called it a working group at HPD. We thought Department of City Planning was another idea to evaluate and propose alternatives to 421A. To basically create more pressure to the state to replace this policy with something that will help spur more residential real estate development, especially of affordable housing.
Chuck, I see your hand is raised.
Joseph, I think it's a great idea. And, you know, what we've run into in the past on things like that is that we put them in, and then as Marissa pointed out, the city says, oh, no, that's not appropriate for a city budget. And so you're quite right. Sometimes we've talked about doing a study or something to try to use the budget process to highlight a policy issue that we think the city should take a position on. And I'm totally open on that. I think that's a good use of this process, and it's a good request.
Right. Chuck, thank you for that. I mean, that's traditionally been the way that we've tried to push our priorities, even though they don't come traditionally through a budget request, or they'll get denied as a state issue or some other issue.
I think that's right. And so we've still raised the issue, even though we get pushback on the process and the specific budget request. We've still stated a community board preference, and we can use that in other work with our council members and otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Marissa, do you want to speak to that, just given that you flagged the state issue?
I think Chuck's right. Unless, of course, you get to a point where you're really deciding where you have too many asks and you have to drop some, then, then maybe you would think about it a little bit differently. But if you're not in that position, then, there's certainly no harm in it taking a place, as long as it's not taking the place of something that is more city related. I would also just remind everybody that we're talking about FY24, which is essentially 2 years down the road as you're sort of thinking about these requests.
Mm-hmm. Okay, are there any others that need explanation? Again, the way that we're going to do this, I think, is, as Tristan pointed out, everyone needs to, not just the housing silo, put their requests into the spreadsheet. I'm going to ask that this be done by the end of the week, so that this can go out to everyone for ranking, and the ranking can be returned to Julie and I, so that we're ready a week before our September meeting with the final ranking for voting. And that will streamline this process. Zona.
Just a question, what months are the fiscal years from? Are they like the same as the calendar year?
No. So it goes, I'm gonna lie, it's July, right, Marissa?
July 1st.
July 1st.
30th.
June 30th, yeah.
Got it, thank you.
I always want to say it starts June 30th, but I'm always wrong, and I always think in my head. July 1st.
So fiscal year 24 would start July 1st, 2023 and end June 30th, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And also, just a reminder, just to make everything more difficult and complicated, the next BEX meeting is late because of accommodations for the holiday. So it's not until October 6th, which is just 1 week before the full board. So just to keep that in mind.
Right. Again, we need to finalize this by the next meeting. Traditionally, we would rank this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 by the entire committee, after giving our priorities on the policy areas like we did tonight. Chuck.
If it's available on Google Docs, I couldn't find it. Is there a way that you all could send out a link to exactly what we did last year, so we have that as a precedent?
Yes, that was sent already to the committee.
My bad.
2 or 3 times with the Google Docs, but we will send it again with the Google Docs with last year's. We've been sending these again with last year's requests and the response from the agencies and the ultimate determination on our requests, so that we can take the older requests and reissue them for 2024. And then also our new requests that we're hearing from stakeholders in our outreach.
Thank you,
I have
Renee.
a quick question regarding this older spreadsheet. Is there is it divided by silos? Because I just saw like an aggregate grouping.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's aggregated because that is the way we ultimately ranked.
Okay,
You
Makes
know, it's not going to be by silo. So the housing budget and it's not going to be just their top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the next silo, 1, 2, 3. We have to determine what is our most important, what we think is the most important. So this Google Doc will go out to everyone, and each of all of the entries, you would rank them 1 to whatever number we have, so that we can get them in some sort of order.
got it.
It's a laborious process, and we used to sit with a big spreadsheet, and it was easy. Again, I keep saying this, it's easier in person, but somehow it's just easier in person to go through and sort of quickly, everybody's reading the same page and ranking them. So I need to rely on everyone to open their Google Docs, put their requests into the Google Doc, and then when Julie and I resend it, to rank it. Bradley.
Just a quick question. Do we have any sense on when the open meetings, or not the open meetings, the virtual, whatever the law is that allows us to meet virtually? Because I know it's renewed on a month-by-month basis. Do we have any sense of what it's going to be for next month?
That I defer to Marissa.
It's been extended until September 23rd at this point. So potentially the next round of committee meetings could be in person. My gut feeling is that they will be, but I can't say for sure.
That they will be in person?
I think so. Yeah,
Meaning
I
that-
think they extended it through the summer and to get school started, and then we'll, of course, we'll see the trends of the virus, but we'll see. We have until September 23rd, and we probably will only know a couple of days before that date on whether it'll be extended or not.
So it's very possible that we actually could be doing this ranking at that next board budget meeting in person.
The problem is, Bradley, is that we need to have that ranking before that time, before our next meeting, so that we can vote. There's a lot of requests. So traditionally, I thought tonight that we might go through it all. But I see that some people are missing their requests and some people have put a lot in. So it might be worthwhile for the committee to read through these and rank these before that meeting. So then we can have the conversation rather than horse trading over, I think 1, no, I think 2, and then having to vote. That meeting could last hours if we do it that way. So we need to have the ranking before that. So what we will do is Julie and I will send out the final Google document for everyone to rank and get back to us. Final request should be in by the end of next week. Julie and I will send the document for ranking, and then we'll give you a time by which you should get that ranking back to us, so that at our next meeting, we will simply be voting on the ranking and moving those around. Does that make sense to everybody? Joe, I saw you had your hand raised.
And then I lowered it because it's really a question for Marissa. I know the tax rates are set by the state, but what about the assessment? I thought the property value assessment was done by the city.
That's correct. Yes.
So maybe then, because then the questions about the tax incentives, we could focus on a lowered assessment for those properties that, that are converted.
I think the city had, to Joe Frewer's earlier point, the city has done quite a bit of work on reforming those assessments.
Mhm.
And I think that's where they would focus. And there's been a number of studies put out about it. I could try and find those and send those around to people if they like. But I think they're focusing on that tax reform more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other entries in here? Joseph, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify with Joe. Joe, I think that's kind of was that what you were suggesting, what Marissa just said, just kind of encouraging the city to move that property tax reform process along, more quickly.
And lower the assessments for those properties to incentivize the conversion.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That's helpful. I'll defer to Zona and Brad, because they did work on a lot of these in this housing silo. I don't know if there were any others that you thought might be confusing just reading them without context.
I think the rest of them are fairly clear. Because only the housing ones dealt with some of that, the sort of alphanumeric codes and the tax financing and that sort of more complicated stuff. I think the rest of it is more straightforward.
Agreed.
Okay. So what we are going to do is by the end of next week, every team should have its requests in the Google Doc. We will resend this to every single committee member. They need to enter their requests, and then we will resend for ranking. So for every request there, looking at and framing it with the number one in each silo, how they feel each, how important each budget request is. And that way we can vote on the ranking. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. I just want to go back to, we can have a discussion so that this will help us when we think about ranking everything. Julie, can we go back to the priority list and the district needs statement? When we look at the top 3 in our district, can we have, let's just have a quick conversation about how we see the top 3 issues in the district. Can I have comments from the committee? When you look at these silos, these policy issues here. And this is from OMB. This list is not something that I made up, and you can just see other there. But when you look at this list, can I have some comments on how people view 1, 2, and 3? Tristan.
Thanks. I'd say number 1, I think still remains economic recovery and development. I think we put it as first last year for the first time because I think Midtown was disproportionately impacted by COVID, and I think that is still in effect right now. I think vacancy rates are going up. Workers are not necessarily coming back into the city, and I think this is going to be something that's going to linger, and if it's not addressed, really impact Midtown, but also the city as a whole in how we fund everything when all of these leases come up in the next few years. And so that's going to be something that we really need to fix. Beyond that, I would put land, I'd put infrastructure resiliency and homelessness as the other 2.
Okay, thanks, Tristan. Bradley.
I would say my top 3, and not the specific order, are affordable housing, crime and public safety, and homelessness. I think that reflects a lot of what I've heard from the various silos tonight and also in our outreach.
Okay, thank you. Zona.
I would say top 3 are affordable housing, homelessness, and trash removal and cleanliness.
Okay. Joe.
Since there are 2 police precincts in our district that are number 1 and number 2 in all of New York City in crime, I would place crime as the number 1 issue. Then I would agree that affordable housing and homelessness would be next.
Okay. Other people. Mark.
So I would also go with crime and public safety, homelessness, and the economic recovery and development as my top 3.
Thank you. Okay, Joe. Oh, you already went. Julie?
I guess if I was to choose homelessness or affordable housing, it sounds like that homeless advocates are championing affordable housing instead of more, services for homeless. If that makes sense.
So you're saying affordable housing over homelessness, meaning homeless services, because it's just homelessness.
I guess they were very clear. It's not shelters that they're asking for or the safe havens. They want permanent housing.
Understood. Any other comments? Chuck, what would you say yours look like?
Well, okay. I think economic recovery and development is one of the top three. And I think that's a very broad category, so I think it covers a lot. I think affordable housing also gets at homelessness, so I think that we can talk about both in the same thing. And I'm back on quality of life just because that's what I hear people talking about, but that's closely related to crime.
Thank you. Okay. Jonathan, what do you think? How would you rank these?
I would probably say definitely two are trash removal, cleanliness, and quality of life issues. If I had to pick a third, I would probably say affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody who hasn't weighed in on this? Any members of the public here who would like to weigh in on this? Okay, so what I'm hearing is that affordable housing seems to be our number one. And homelessness, we're sort of saying, is sort of absorbed into that. We're looking at economic recovery and crime and public safety. That's what I heard most. Does anybody disagree with that? I'm thinking of that as a way to frame. I also heard trash as a fourth, the cleanliness issue. Does anybody disagree with that as a framework of looking as we think about ranking our budget requests? Any comments? Okay. All right. So we have affordable housing, and we are going to subsume homelessness into affordable housing. So when we talk about this, we can talk about affordable housing and homelessness as encompassed within that. And then I think we have economic recovery and crime, if I'm reading the room correctly. So if we use that as a framework, as we think about ranking, and that doesn't mean absolutely, sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
All right. I'm not sure that's quite the same, meshing affordable housing and homelessness in together.
Okay.
Affordable housing is, just affordable housing, exactly what it is. I think homelessness encompasses a little more, like not just affordable housing, but services, caseworkers, healthcare, that sort of thing. So I'm not sure if that's, they're completely the same. They're similar, but maybe not that close. That's it.
Thank you. So I want, we're not finalizing the most pressing issues, but I wanted you to use that as a framework, if that helps in terms of ranking the budget requests. Does that make sense? So that we have our number one priorities, and the budget requests will sort of follow those most pressing issues. So by the end of the week, we get those requests in. Julie and I will turn it around to you for ranking. You will rank it, return to us. I will have the end date for that, and we will do that the week before our next meeting, which, as Marisa said, is October. And then we need to finalize that at our October meeting so that we can get it to the full board in time to get it to OMB by the end of October. Any questions? Mark.
Hi, I have a quick question, and apologies if this was addressed earlier. But I think it was either mentioned at an earlier meeting or I read it in one of the earlier spreadsheets. But for example, it was mentioned earlier that hate crimes on the subway are an issue. And is there anything in terms of a budget request that can be done? Because I thought that we couldn't do anything with respect to like the NYPD
So,
and MTA.
right, the MTA is sort of out of bounds in terms of the budget request because that is not a city agency. But in
Mhm.
terms of hate crimes, there is a, I'm blanking on the name of the unit that we can request funding. So it's not true to say that we cannot ask for funding for the NYPD, but we cannot specifically say we want more police officers to do X because that's the province of the police department, but we can ask for funding for.
Got it. Okay, so we can
those
increase
programs.
funding, but not like earmark, like direct it for.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
For specific usage within that's the purview of the management of that agency, if that makes
Perfect.
sense.
Yep. Thanks.
So that we could actually, and Marissa, I'm blanking on the name of the agency that deals with hate crimes. I know that they came to us, and that is something that we could ask for more funding for that particular unit.
Yeah, it's the mayor's office of hate crimes, or
Yes, thank
I
you.
don't have that exactly right, but but you could ask for staffing lines for that unit.
Right.
You could also ask for funding for, language translations and further outreach and educational resources around hate crimes.
Mhm. Thank you.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, any more questions about the process going forward and getting this tightened up and ready for our next meeting and the vote of the priorities and the rankings? Comments, questions? We're all agreed we're going to get them in there. We're going to finish it, turn it around and rank. Yes? Thank you all. I know that this is a hard, and Bradley, if we are all in person, it's going to go really quickly and really smoothly. And
I'll take your word for it. I haven't experienced it in person yet, so.
Joe and Chuck and Julie will tell you how much fun it is. I just want to check any member of the public, if we have any members of the public, any comments or suggestions about the budget process, the budget itself, any suggestions about priorities and or budget requests? I don't see any. Okay, folks, I'm going to say good night unless there are any more questions or comments or any other business.
Thank you, Renee.
Seeing none, I will see you, but I will speak to you or at least be sending you these things and following up with you for the budget in the next few weeks. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all. Bye.